IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Here's your smart fact of the day. As of April 2022, Elon Musk's net worth is around US $273 billion. And do you know what his official designation is? He calls himself Technoking because he really doesn't believe too much in designations. Isn't that an interesting fact to start our episode about designations and whether they're important? Yeah, that's what we're going to explore this time around. Let's go. On a similar note, Jack Dorsey is also quite strange in his designation. He calls himself Blockhead of all things, and that's what caught my fancy actually, because it's a little self-denigrating title. It's not Technoking, which is like all bluster, but Jack Dorsey actually calls himself Blockhead and CEO of the new company that he's at. Not really at Twitter anymore, but he's a blockhead because he's the CEO of Block. But you know what? I'll argue that both Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk are so rich and so famous that they can get away with this. They can call themselves whatever the hell you want. I think it started off with Mark Zuckerberg having a, strange sort of a card that he said, I'm CEO bitch or something like that. I think at least it was there in the social network, which kind of popularized the notion of how startup founders don't really believe too much in designations. And that's all very well and fine if you're really successful and famous. In fact, Paulo Coelho had said in a book of his that it's a very strange phenomenon. The richest people in a restaurant are the ones who are not wearing the ties and the suits because they don't care. They don't really care. And it's a very weird fact of life that if you're in a situation wherein titles, designations, suits, and ties don't matter, then you're amongst 0.0001% of all of humanity. For the rest of us, I think designations are a serious thing and they should kind of be considered even if they don't matter. I'm going to actually talk about where they matter and why they don't. But first, I wanted to also talk about my own journey in academia when I shifted from being an entrepreneur to being an associate dean. Now look at this title, associate dean. So that's not necessarily a dean who's obviously higher up than an associate dean, but an associate professor, assistant professor, professor emeritus, professor at large, adjunct professor, so many titles, right? All of these mean something. So even the world of academia, where you might think it's all egalitarian and the rest of it, is not really true. You have all these designations and they mean a certain thing. They mean a certain kind of respect that you look at that person's card and you give that person. Now, you're in a situation wherein you're looking at somebody's card and deciding what they're worth. It's an interesting position to be. And if you're in the corporate world, you probably are going to face something similar. So if you look at any designation, you'll be the vice president of something or the chief XO of something, marketing, finance, HR, etc., etc. But for somebody who might think it's an impressive title, you just have to look at the person's face when you show your card or, somebody connects with you on LinkedIn or something like that. And you'll soon know whether it's an impressive title or designation or not. In fact, we do know of certain companies, certain banks specifically, which seem to be specializing in this sort of thing, wherein almost everybody is a vice president of something. And it sounds really impressive, perhaps, to customers of that bank. But if you're trying to get into a bank or if you're trying to showcase within your peer network, if you're working in the world of banking, possibly a vice president doesn't mean as much as it would mean in some other sector. So every sector has a certain sort of importance given to a certain title. So that's another sort of mysterious thing that comes along, in the ride of actually understanding what a designation is and what it means. Now, for somebody like me, when I shifted out of being an employee into the gig economy, I decided to have a little fun with my designation. I started calling myself the traveling professor, and I soon realized that the traveling professor was not just a designation, it was a bit of a personal brand. So that kind of worked for me, because then that name really had a ring to it and the rest of it. Perhaps people in the gig economy might think of more creative ways of describing themselves and therefore their designations. And perhaps some really rich people like Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey actually have that liberty as well. But if I really break it down into first principles, a designation breaks down into the first principle of hierarchy. So all human beings actually have a hierarchical bent. All of us have hierarchical understanding of the way in which we are in life. There are 2 or 3 different kinds of hierarchies. One hierarchy is that which is experienced internally. So everybody knows who you are internally, and there is a certain pecking order which means something within an organization, whether it is academic or whether it's a bank or whatever. Everybody knows who you are based upon and your rank in the hierarchy internally and how much power you wield. So that's really important. The second kind of hierarchy is the one which you see with customers. So, when you say, let me see your manager, please, actually what you're asking for is a designation or a title. So again, it kind of implies our faith in hierarchies, whether we like it or not. The third thing is when you're going for, let's say, a job interview, or whether you are, kind of going for a networking event, and when you showcase what your card is, what your title is, again, a certain kind of meta level of data is communicated with the designation that you hold. Now, whether we like it or not, designations mean something, and that meaning actually is communicated to other human beings, and we all stand in that world. I recently had the experience of actually giving a lecture, a seminar of sorts. And one of the questioners after my seminar, my talk was over, asked me about the fact that, hey, and I was talking about hierarchies. It was not connected to designations, but that person said, do you really think hierarchy, you can't make a generalistic point that all human beings are hierarchical. And I just said to that person, with all due respect, just see around you. We see hierarchies all around us, and we actually kind of try to work around those hierarchies. And there's an explicit understanding of a hierarchy and an implicit one. Now, the implicit one will be the kind of power you actually wield within an organization or outside in the marketplace, and that is totally your power, your agency, your strength, your skills. But those are not very evident. The explicit power is the one which you hold with your card and the designation that your card has. Now, that may be old school, but it's still very, very valid in today's world. So if I have to be in the human race, and if I have to be in the corporate world, or if I have to be having a job or a role, I want to be very clear about where I stand in the pecking order. Now, it may not be everyone's cup of tea, and I personally think don't take your designation or title too seriously. When you go to bed at night, just sleep and don't take your title along with you, or don't take your title to work even. But that is just a wishful thought. Actually, sometimes the hierarchy works in your favor, because a lot of times you spend a lot of time wasting your resources on somebody who doesn't have the power to take a decision, and so on and so forth. So there you have it. I think you have the designation orientation. I don't think it's anywhere close to what Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey feel that it should be like, but it's very much part and parcel of the kind of world that we live in. To my mind, if I look at designations, the best way to approach a designation is to understand that it could get you through a door, a metaphorical door, but once you're through that door, you need to prove yourself, and the designation stays outside that door. Once you're in, you got to prove yourself. Well, I think that designations are an interesting topic. They're a prickly topic, and they're a topic that all of us need to understand. I personally feel that do take a look at it pragmatically and look at the designation and its impact internally with your customer and with your peer network whenever you're going to be promoted, or whenever you're going to look for a new job, or whenever you're going to actually speak about your designation in public. I hope you liked this episode. of mine on Smarter with Sid. It is a bit of a political one, an office politics one, but I just thought I'll just throw this one in. And if you like podcasts like this and episodes like this, do like my podcast, do subscribe to this one. And hey, IVM's got a lot of great stuff for you. So do check out all of the podcasts that they've got on. And if you like me, well, my designation is the traveling professor. I'm on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Do connect with me there.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Think Fast, Varun and Sujita discuss Netflix's new buttons and do a rundown on the ongoing hiding and fighting trends in startups. On Big Talk About Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Meghna share strategies to help your child develop a healthy self-image. On Cyrus Says, Nivedita, Naveen, Antriksh and Cyrus discuss KGF Chapter 2 crossing 200 crore rupees over a single weekend. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth talks about whether brands should use sustainability as an angle for marketing. And on Tere Mere Raste, Keshav takes us to the Sea of Humanity and Faith, the Kumbh Mela. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, please don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And remember, you can always check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube to take a look at what those channels are. We're also doing a small listener survey to understand how you respond to our shows and the advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It really helps us build better shows for you and understand what you're looking for from advertising and what we can talk to advertisers about who you are. Please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It really would help us out. Thank you so much. And finally, would like to thank our sponsors for the network this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcast's website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.